So, Mike,
yes.
'Twas the week before Christmas.
Oh.
And all through the land, it doesn't rhyme by the way, all through the land, not a creature moved, apart from two geezers in a van. So we're on the road, we're somewhere near Bradford, and we are coming to pick up a bike for me, but Mike doesn't know what it is. So I've given him a few crap clues, so we're about 5 minutes away.
I'm none the wiser.
You're none the wiser. You thought you knew, but you're a bit confused now.
Yeah.
So it's a classic bike, and it will undoubtedly feature in a Lemon Drizzle Gang video coming to you soon.
Absolutely. My money's on an R90S,
And
but we'll see.
for those of you who think I have inherited a few million quid to indulge my passion for classic bikes, I haven't. So I've got to sell one or two to pay for this one. Okay, so we're nearly there. So we'll see.
Next thing is seeing the bike.
Yeah, next thing is seeing the bike. Cheers, Mike.
Hi everyone, my name's Mike and welcome to the Lemon Drizzle Gang. Sorry we've been away for such a long time, but finally we're back. The reason for the absence is a couple of the guys got COVID. Thankfully now are fully recovered from that. But also the roads have been absolutely horrible. You know, we've had quite a wet winter, we've had a couple of storms here in the north of England, and the last test we did, which was Stuart on his Triumph Trident, it took him 2 days to clean the bike after all the road grime on it, so it's pretty unfair to expect people to take their beautiful bikes out on those horrible salt covered roads. But as you can see from around me, spring has finally sprung, which is superb. It feels lovely, spring's in the air. So Monday we went out and we took the R90S out, and fantastic day's riding. It was, you know, first proper day's riding back of the year, and it was lovely. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and it was just lovely. So you'll see the results from that in the upcoming film, and we've got plenty more to come. In fact, on Monday, what day is it today? Saturday today. So on Monday we are going to test a Marini 500, which I'm really looking forward to because I used to ride a Marini 350 back in the late 70s, early 80s. And we've also got what have we got? We've got a 76 Honda CB 750. We have a 74 Harley Davidson Electra Glide, which we have actually tried filming before, but we had to abort that, so this will be the second go at that. We've got a B44 Scrambler, BSA, lots of things. We've even got a collection of 16 special mopeds that we're going to have a look at. So if you'd like to come along with us and that's the sort of stuff you're interested in, please, if you're not already, subscribe, like and subscribe, and hit the little notification bell so you can be informed of what's coming up. And thank you for your support, thank you for all your comments, and on with the show. Okay, so this is Dave and this is his latest acquisition. So do you want to tell us about it?
I'd love to, Mike, thank you. Yeah, I'm getting a bit, you're probably getting a bit bored with me saying it, but I haven't had this bike very long. And as you can see, it is a 1975 BMW R90S, flagship of the BMW range at that time. And I've owned a couple of airheads over the years, but I've never owned the ultimate airhead in a lot of people's eyes, mine included, which is a Daytona Orange R90S. So very much one of my bucket list bikes. And it's a little bit different to most of my other classic bikes I've either owned in the past or own now, in that it's not a particularly leery bike, it's not loud, it's not sort of look at me, aren't I fast, aren't I glamorous sort of thing. It's
so Dave finally grows up and comes of age.
That's right, yeah, at the age of matures into an airhead. Mind you, there are people who said I've always been a bit of an airhead. So, ho, ho, ho. So, yeah, as you can see, Daytona Orange, a little bit of history about the R90S. So, turn of the 70s, BM were only really selling motorbikes in fairly small numbers to mainly police forces for two reasons. One, they were horrendously expensive, and two, they were really just distance bikes. They weren't really much good at anything else. They certainly didn't handle very well with the Earl's Forks. Slash 5 came out in, I think, 1970, 71, and they updated the frame, made it a lot better.
So when did the Earl's Forks go out?
Just about 1970.
Yeah,
about 1970.
So it was a Slash 5.
That was the Slash 5.
Yeah.
Still had a 4-speed box, still had drum brakes, but updated in a lot of ways. Much more production engineered to make them cheaper to make in the new factory, because all of these were made in the Spandau factory in Berlin, not in Munich, which is obviously the München in the BMW. And then, sure enough, in about 74, they launched the Slash 6 series, which introduced disc brakes, 5-speed gearbox, electric start. No, sorry, the Slash 5s were electric start. A few other changes. Basically a more modern bike. And they had to do that because they basically were only selling bikes, selling small numbers to mainly police authorities and that, and they weren't really making any money. And a lot of the bigwigs at BMW wanted to close the whole thing down. They came out with a Slash 6 and they needed a flagship. And the guy who decided they needed a flagship was Bob Lutz, who was an ex-General Motors bigwig, American guy. And he rode a hot rod Honda 750, so he knew about modern Japanese bikes. And he said, we need to make a statement. And one of the guys working in the BMW car division at the time, an industrial designer, was Hans Muth, who went on to design the R100RS and the Suzuki Katanas. But he was an industrial designer, and he took his inspiration for this bike from three things. One was not to spend much money doing it over and above the normal Slash 6s. Second thing was to fighter jets. So he said that we need a nice dashboard that gives the rider everything he needs to know. So the inclusion of a voltmeter and a clock was pretty revolutionary. The only other bike that had a clock in historic terms that came with one was a bike you featured on the Lemon Drizzle Gang, Mike.
The California.
Nope, the Ariel Square 4 originally came with a wind-up 8-day clock.
Did it
Yeah,
really?
in the tank, yeah. And that was the only time. So a quartz accurate clock was pretty revolutionary. So you've got this lovely dashboard, very much redolent of fighter jets, as I said. And then the third inspiration he had was sporting British bikes. So the seat cowl and the sort of streamlining and the half fairing were all pretty unheard of.
So what? So like a Norton Fastback type?
Yeah, I guess the Norton Fastback had probably appearing just before then, and just sort of the lines that give it the impression of speed. You know, I mean, compared to a 1960s BM, it looks sporting. You know, BM hadn't done sporting before then.
It's radical, isn't it?
Yeah,
it doesn't
I mean,
look it today.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Well, I remember when they first came out.
Oh yeah, it was a hell of a thing. And the other thing that popped people's eyes out was the price.
Yeah.
I mean, one of these was literally twice as much as a Norton Commando.
Yeah.
So when you bought one of these, you know, people either thought you'd arrived or you really had arrived.
Yeah.
You know. Could they justify the cost? A lot of people say no. I mean, the quality of construction was impeccable for the most part. You know, and they were hand built. They were all hand built by one guy on the production line, who bolted them all together, each one. And the ladies that did the beautiful pinstriping, this isn't the original pinstriping, used to occasionally sign inside, put their signatures inside the fairing or under the tank. Yeah. So lots of stories like that. But what's it like to ride? You know, I haven't done many long rides. We're just coming out. Today's the first day of spring. Hurrah! And this really is not a bike just to take for a quick fang for our Australian cousins, a quick hoon. It's something that makes sense with distance. I always remember a British journalist said about his first BMW Airhead, not an R90S, but it applies to all the flat twins, is his BMW started making sense about the same time that his Bonneville shed its first tappet cover.
Oh.
You know? So they're built for distance. You know, the riding position is superb, everything's nicely balanced. The aerodynamics within the constraints of a quarter fairing really takes the pressure off your chest. This one's got a slightly modified gearbox. It's got a later gearbox linkage. So the gearbox was one of the few things that drew criticism at the time. If you read road tests, they said, you know, Bill Haylock in Bike Magazine said, it's nearly as fast as the fast Jap bikes like the Z1000. It handles nearly as well as a Ducati or a British bike. It's pretty much as simple as a Brit parallel twin. You can look after it yourself. You know, it does everything nearly as well as everything else. It's more comfortable than probably anything else on the market. It is superbly comfortable. So he says, but it's not a nearly bike. Everything is beautifully rounded, you know. And there really wasn't a bad review of them apart from the price and the gearbox. The gearbox can be a bit crashy. This one is a lot better, as I said, because it's got the later linkage, and I think it's just been rebuilt before I bought it. It's got a later selector mechanism, which helps. The other major change it's got, it was the first bike to come with twin discs. They're not particularly amazing. They're not as good as, say, Brembos or Lockheeds, but they're all right. What improves them dramatically is it's got, the master cylinder was originally under the tank, cable operated, so that if you had an accident, you didn't snap off and squirt brake fluid everywhere. Oh, okay. I think was the thinking.
Yeah, that's clever.
BM. Yeah, very clever, except it didn't work very well. This works. These brakes are all right. They're pretty good. So other modifications are the suspension's a little bit firmer than it was as standard. They had massive long travel suspension. I think it was 8 inches at the front and 6 at the back.
So that's been upgraded?
It's just got more progressive springs, so it's just a bit firmer.
So previous owner's done that?
Yeah. And Coney shocks which firm up the rear.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more sporting. They always said, and BM did this very consciously, that they handle well up to about 9/10, and then at the final 10% they just get a little bit wayward. And yeah, I can see that. It hasn't got that feedback that, say, the Commando's got, or even the Laverda's got. On the other hand, I remember once being in France on a Guzzi V11, which handled okay, but it was very firm. My mate was on a flat twin BM, and we got onto a bumpy road, and he just disappeared into the distance because I was just bouncing between the hedges, barely in control. So, you know, there's definitely a place for long travel, softly damped suspension, and this sort of epitomises it. So, other than that, you know, it's all been gone through, it's all been done. It goes nicely, I would say, up to about 80, the Commando will stick with it. Above that, the aerodynamics and a little bit more power than a Commando, it probably sneaks ahead, and it certainly feels a little bit more comfortable and feels like it would do it all day long. Whereas Commando, you really feel like once you get above 80, this is just my feelings, you're kind of pushing it a little bit for what is basically a 1940 something design modified. This is an old design, but BM beefed it up continually right up until
What year does that flat twin design go back to? It's pre-war, is it? Oh.
I mean, pre-war for the basic architecture.
Yeah.
They uprated a lot of things. The /5 was the real thing. They moved the camshaft under the bike to lower the centre of gravity. They did a lot of changes to, as I said, make it a lot more easy to manufacture. Up until the /5 in 1970, BMs were really put together by artisans.
Yeah.
They weren't put together by factory workers, they were put together by artisans, and the price reflected that. What they did with this was make it cheaper to make, but cleverly didn't drop the price. Ha-ha. So,
and the other thing is that's amazing about this is the colour, and when it came out, you know, I know there were the Suzukis and the Kawasaki's and the
metal flakes.
Yeah,
they had,
but that orange was
funnily
amazing.
enough, Bob Lutz, who was the guy who, you know, was the guy in charge of the project and sort of gave it the go-ahead, he didn't like the colour, neither did Hans Smuth, the industrial designer. Hans Smuth liked the smoke grey silver of the 1974.
Oh, okay.
And it was still available in smoke grey silver, which was considered the more reserved choice in 1975. But the Daytona Orange really took off. Everyone else liked it.
Yeah.
He used to call it the egg yolk.
Oh, right. Well, for me, it's oh, what was his name at the TT?
Can't remember.
Yeah,
I mean, there were a number. We'll think of it as soon as we switch the camera off, won't we?
Yeah.
The other guy, of course, who made him famous was people like Reg Pridmore, and McLaughlin in the States Superbike racing these things. Massive budget. Helmut Dana won the production TT on it. You're right, and then with highly, and I mean highly modified versions in American Superbike racing, which was literally just taken off in the States. They dominated that over people like Cook Nielsen on the Ducati. Cook Nielsen's Ducati was modified. These things were just like completely gone through.
So is that why it's called Daytona?
They named all their colours after racetracks in 1974 or 5. So the TT Silver was obviously after the TT. Monza, I think, was the blue, Monza blue. There was what's the ring circuit in Germany?
The Nordschleife, Nürburgring.
Nürburg, I think it was Nürburg green. I might be wrong in that, so you know.
Should have been Darley Moor green.
Oh yeah, that would have sold like hotcakes. And Alton Park orange.
That's it.
Yeah. Anyway, they messed up with that and they called it Daytona Orange. Like, that's not glamorous. So yeah, you know, it's just beautifully engineered. Everything is resolved. You've got a toolkit sealed from the weather under the seat. You've got a puncture repair outfit in the cowl. You've got a pump under the seat there. You know, it came with everything, but then it should have done twice as much as a Commando, you know. Horrendously expensive bike.
So is that rack standard?
The rack is a BMW item. As standard, they would have had a small black grab rail that looks just like that bit, and then that bit was an optional extra that a lot of people went for. Same with the Krauser pannier racks. I've got the Krauser panniers for it. Click them on and you really feel, and the reality matches the perception, that you could just get on this thing, fill the 5.5 gallon tank, head off to the south of France, you know, with somebody on the back if you wanted. And there was absolutely no doubt that when you got there, the thing wouldn't be covered in oil, it wouldn't have broken down, you wouldn't have had longer arms from hanging onto your high-barred Japanese unstreamlined classic. It was just all so resolved, and that's what you paid the money for.
Fantastic.
Okay, should we take it for a ride?
Yeah, that'll be great. I'm dying for a go on it. Thank you very much for that.
I don't know what the German for take it for a fang is.
Okay, so this is me, Mike, riding the bike now. If you hear it, gearbox a bit clunky, it's not actually that bad, it's just the way that we've set the microphone up on the bike and put it underneath the seat hump. So it is actually a very smooth gearbox on this bike. So what's it feel like? Well, it feels like a BMW. Feels like a really good BMW. Controls are good. Throttle a little bit heavier than the modern bike because it's got those big Del Autos with the big springs. Gear change is smooth, especially for BMW. It's really smooth. I'd say it's as good as the 1200 GS's gear change. Handling is fantastic for period, and the seating position is just incredible. It's you know, the sports tourer, you could tour all day on this. You could cross continents, you know, and you know, once you get, you know, take it to the Alps, and once you get there, it's got the performance and handling so that you can really enjoy it. So I'm just about to overtake this car. So when you get to 5,500 RPM, it kind of changes personality. Watch this. Takes off like it goes like the clappers, you know, for a bike that was came out in 1974. In fact, in contemporary tests, I believe they did roll-on tests with Z1 Kawasaki, and this thing would win the, you know, the roll-ons. You know, it's obviously hasn't got the ultimate power of the Z1, but you know, it's certainly up there. You know, there's a handful of bikes. There's the Verde Jota, the Ducati 100 SS. Z1 Kawasaki, and this, and when it first came out, I was more drawn towards the sportier end, you know, the Jotas and the 900SS, but looking back at it now, this thing is just as capable as those bikes. You know, in real world conditions and on a, you know, a bumpy road, this is great. The handling's great, the suspension, nice long travel suspension. In fact, you know, you could go out with your modern riding mates and you know, unless they're on sports bikes, you know, you could keep up with them. You know, fantastic. And they did well in racing. You know, they did well in the Castrol 6-hour racing, and also at Daytona. I think Doug Pridmore, I think, did really well, and I can see why. You know, it's a lovely thing. Listen to it. Dave did tell me to, he said, make sure you rev it, so don't shout at me in the comments if you think I'm thrashing it, but you know, as long as Dave doesn't give me a thick ear when he sees this video. But oh, it's great. Listen to it. Yeah, it's a really resolved bike, this. You know, I've owned a number of BMWs over the years. Had a R1200 GS, and more importantly, I had an R1100S, and I can really see the lineage in, you know, between this bike and the R1100S, and it felt very familiar to me the minute I got on it. What we're planning on doing in the future is taking out a R1250 RS, which is the modern equivalent to the BMW Sports Tourer, and I'm sure that, you know, you'll see similarities going back. So you know, that will make an interesting video. But I absolutely love this bike. It took me by surprise a little bit, because it's something you kind of think of BMWs of that era as being a bit sports toury, a bit Germanic. You know, it's what the police ride, but no, not when you actually ride it. It's got a different personality. Plus, it's comfortable. As I said before, it's that word that keeps coming up. It's resolved, and I think, Dave, I think this is a keeper, mate. This bike, it's just a wonderful thing. We're going to go to France later on this year, and everybody will be on modern bikes, or modern-ish bikes, and you can take this. It would fit in fantastically well, especially with those Krauser panniers. So yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved this bike. So thank you very much, as always, for the opportunity to ride yet another incredible machine.